I had always believed that building a home together was a symbol of love, a shared dream taking shape one brick at a time. Samantha and I had spent months planning, choosing every tile, every color, every fixture with care. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, the place where we would spend the rest of our lives together. But something changed. I first noticed it in the little things. Her phone, always face down, the way she laughed at texts she never shared, how she suddenly became invested in long discussions with Mike, the contractor. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Mike just knows what he's doing, she'd say dismissively whenever I questioned why he was constantly around, even on days we weren't scheduled for renovations. I had no reason to doubt her. Yet, a strange unease began gnawing at me, like an itch I couldn't scratch. I chalked it up to stress, the pressure of deadlines, the endless back and forth with the budget. But deep down, a voice whispered, something was off. One evening, after a week-long business trip, I returned home earlier than planned, eager to surprise Samantha. The house smelled different. Not in a bad way, just off. It wasn't the familiar scent of fresh paint or sawdust, but something subtle, something personal, something that didn't belong. The lights were dimmed, and I could hear music playing upstairs. Soft murmurs drifted from the partially renovated master bedroom. My heart pounded. I stepped carefully, my mind racing. Maybe she had invited a friend over. Maybe Mike had stayed late to finish something. But deep down, I knew. The second I heard her laugh, a sound that should have belonged to me but was meant for someone else, I felt my stomach tighten. I didn't burst in. I couldn't. Instead, I backed away, feeling a strange sense of clarity wash over me. If she was doing what I thought she was, then she had already made her choice. I just needed proof. I needed a plan. I needed control. Downstairs, I grabbed a drink, my mind spiraling into action. Samantha had no idea I was home. That was my advantage. I needed to confirm my suspicions, to see things for myself. No accusations. No dramatic confrontations. Just cold, hard evidence. I wouldn't let emotions drive me into a reckless mistake. Not yet. I waited. An hour passed. Then another. When I finally heard the front door open and shut, I stayed out of sight. Samantha walked in, her hair slightly tousled, her lips curved in a contented little smile. She looked at her phone and sighed, typing something quickly before tossing it onto the counter. "Hey, babe," she called out when she finally noticed me in the kitchen. "Didn't expect you back so soon." I forced a smile. "Missed me?" "Of course." She walked over, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek, but something about it felt wrong. Forced. Distant. I wanted to ask where she'd been. I wanted to demand answers. But instead, I simply said, "Everything good with the house?" She nodded, leaning against the counter, completely unaware that I knew. "Yeah, Mike's been great. We're making good progress." Mike. Always Mike. That night, as Samantha slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, feeling nothing but cold determination settle in my bones. If she thought I was blind, she was wrong. If she thought I would sit back and let this happen, she was a fool. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was about betrayal in the very home we built together. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up before Samantha. She lay peacefully beside me, her breathing even, as if she hadn't just spent the night lying to my face. I watched her for a moment, wondering how long she had been doing this, how long she had looked me in the eyes, kissed me goodnight, and carried on with whatever was happening behind my back. I got out of bed quietly, my mind already working. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, this needed to be handled carefully. If I made a scene too early, she'd just deny it, twist the truth, make me feel like I was imagining things. Instead, I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Downstairs, I made coffee and scrolled through my phone, my thoughts swirling. If she was cheating, she'd eventually slip up. I just had to be patient. "Morning," she murmured as she walked in, stretching. She looked effortlessly beautiful, as if she hadn't a single worry in the world. "Morning," I replied casually. "You sleep well?" "Yeah." "You?" "Like a rock," I lied. She grabbed a mug and poured herself some coffee, leaning against the counter. "So, what's your plan today?" I shrugged. Thought I'd swing by the house, check on things. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed the way her grip on the mug tightened slightly. Oh, I mean, Mike's got it covered. He's been great at keeping things on schedule. Yeah, I know, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Just figured I'd take a look myself. It's our house, after all. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course. After breakfast, I headed to the house. Samantha didn't ask to come with me, which spoke volumes. The renovations had been coming along smoothly, but now, as I walked through the house, it felt different. I ran my fingers along the unfinished walls of the master bedroom, picturing the life we were supposed to build here. I imagined the furniture we picked out, the future we planned. And yet, all I could see now were lies. Then, something caught my eye. On the floor, near the corner, was a small, black velvet box. It looked new, untouched. I crouched down and picked it up, my heart hammering as I flipped it open. Inside was a sleek, expensive-looking watch. My first thought was that it was for me. Maybe she had planned a surprise gift. But that hope vanished the second I noticed the engraved initials on the back. Not mine. The air in my lungs felt thick, suffocating. My hands clenched around the box, rage bubbling just beneath the surface. But I didn't lose control. Not yet. Instead, I stood up, taking a deep breath. She had hidden this here, meaning she didn't expect me to find it, which meant she still thought she was in control. A plan started forming in my mind. If she wanted to play games, I would play too. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture of the watch, the engraving, the box, everything. Then, with deliberate movements, I took the watch out and replaced it with a cheap plastic knockoff I found in my car. I closed the box, setting it right back where I found it. She wouldn't suspect a thing. That evening, I returned home like nothing had happened. Samantha was in the kitchen, humming softly as she made dinner. She glanced up when I walked in. Hey, how was the house? I forced a smile. Coming along great. She nodded, satisfied, and turned back to the stove. Told you Mike's been on top of things. Yeah, I said, watching her carefully. You were right. She didn't know it yet, but her carefully crafted world was already beginning to crumble. The next few days, I played the role of the oblivious husband. I kissed Samantha goodbye in the mornings, texted her throughout the day, and acted as if nothing had changed. Meanwhile, I kept my eyes open, watching for any small slip-ups. I didn't have to wait long. On Wednesday, I came home early, using the excuse that a client meeting had been canceled. As I walked in, I heard Samantha in the bedroom, her voice hushed but urgent. I stopped in the hallway, just out of sight. I know, she said in a low tone. I just need a little more time. There was a pause, then a soft sigh. Of course. No, he doesn't suspect anything. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening into fists. She was talking to someone, probably him, but I needed more. Bursting in now wouldn't do me any good. I forced myself to keep moving, making just enough noise to announce my presence. She came out of the bedroom, phone in hand, a casual smile plastered on her face. Hey, you're home early. Yeah. Meeting got canceled. I leaned against the counter, watching her. Who were you talking to? Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Oh, just Lisa. She's stressing about her wedding plans. Lisa, I repeated, nodding. She all right? Yeah, just overthinking everything. Samantha laughed lightly, walking past me toward the fridge. You know how she is. I did. And I also knew Lisa was on a honeymoon in Italy. But I didn't call Samantha out on the lie. Not yet. That night, as she showered, I checked her phone. She was careful, deleting messages and calls. But no one covers their tracks perfectly. In her recent calls, I found a number saved under the name Work, a number I didn't recognize. I copied it down, then placed her phone back exactly as I found it. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I dialed the number from my own phone. Hey, babe. A male voice answered casually. I stayed silent, my grip tightening around the phone. The voice hesitated. Hello? I hung up. Now I had him. I spent the rest of the day thinking about my next move. Samantha still thought she had control, thought I was completely in the dark. That worked to my advantage. I needed to keep playing along, gathering more information before making my move. That evening, I made a small but satisfying move of my own. I went back to the house, back to the black velvet box she had hidden in the master bedroom. The cheap knockoff watch was still inside. Perfect. I pulled out a screwdriver from my toolbox and carefully removed the back panel of the fake watch. Then, I took a piece of paper, small enough to fit inside, and wrote a message. "You'll never wear this, but he will. Hope he enjoys the fake." I sealed the back of the watch, put it back in the box, and placed it exactly where I had found it. Now, it was only a matter of time. When I got home, Samantha was in an unusually good mood. "I was thinking," she said as she poured a glass of wine, "we should take a weekend trip. Just the two of us." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? Yeah," she said, smiling. "Things have been a little stressful lately. I think we could use some time away together." Interesting. Was this guilt? A way to throw me off? Or was she setting something up? "That sounds great," I said, smiling back. "Let's do it." She beamed, clearly thinking she was still in control. She had no idea. I agreed to the weekend trip, playing my part as the trusting, clueless husband. Samantha was all smiles, as if she had nothing to hide. But I knew better. Every move she made, every excuse she gave, I watched carefully. By Friday afternoon, we were packed and on the road, heading to a secluded lakeside cabin she had booked. The drive was peaceful, with the sun setting over the trees, but my mind was racing. Who was he? How long had it been going on? And most importantly, how far was I willing to go to catch her? Halfway through the drive, she got a text. I saw her glance at her phone, and her lips pressed together for a fraction of a second before she put it back down, screen facing away from me. "Who was that?" I asked casually. She hesitated. "Just Lisa, checking in." Lisa, again. The woman who was currently on her honeymoon in Italy. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "She sure is chatty for someone on vacation." Samantha laughed lightly. "Yeah, she's just stressing about things. You know how she is." A lie. A weak one. But I let it slide, knowing it would only work in my favor. The cabin was beautiful, rustic yet modern, tucked away from everything. As we unpacked, I kept my phone in my pocket, already working on my plan. Before we left, I had installed a small tracking app on Samantha's phone. I didn't want to just suspect anymore. I needed proof. That night, we sat by the fire, sipping wine. She leaned into me, playing the role of the devoted wife. "This is nice," she murmured. "Just us." "Yeah," I said, wrapping an arm around her. "Just us." She had no idea that I had already started digging. The next morning, she insisted on going into town to pick up some things for breakfast. I offered to go with her, but she insisted I stay and relax. That was all I needed. As soon as she was gone, I checked my phone. The tracking app showed she had taken a detour, stopping at a small cafe 5 miles away from the grocery store. I grabbed my keys and drove, keeping a safe distance as I approached the cafe. Parking across the street, I watched through the window, and there she was, laughing, leaning in just a little too close to a man sitting across from her. He was tall, built, dressed casually but too put together for a random cafe visit. Their conversation looked relaxed, natural. Too natural. I clenched the steering wheel. This was it. The proof I needed. Just as I was about to snap a photo, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small black velvet box. The fake watch. She slid it across the table, and he opened it, grinning. He took out the watch, inspecting it before placing it on his wrist. "Looks good, doesn't it?" she said. He smirked. "Yeah, perfect fit." I almost laughed out loud. If only he knew. I took a few quick photos, her handing him the gift, his smug expression, the way she touched his hand as he put it on. That was all I needed. I could have stormed in, could have flipped the table, demanded answers. But that wasn't my style. I wanted something better. I wanted her to suffer the way I had. So instead, I calmly drove back to the cabin, waiting for her to return, pretending I knew nothing. When she walked in, grocery bags in hand, she smiled. "Miss me?" "Always," I said, smiling back. She had no idea. The moment she stepped into the cabin, carrying the grocery bags, she smiled at me as if nothing had happened. It was almost impressive, How easily she could lie, how effortlessly she played the role of the devoted wife. I knew what she had just done. I had seen it with my own eyes. But I had no intention of letting her know that yet. "Miss me?" she asked, her tone light, casual, as if she hadn't just handed another man a gift. "Always," I said, smiling back. She walked past me, setting the groceries down on the counter, humming softly as she unpacked. I watched her closely, waiting for some sign of guilt, some flicker of hesitation. But there was nothing. If anything, she seemed more relaxed than she had in weeks. Maybe, in her mind, she'd gotten away with it. Maybe she thought I was just as clueless as ever. I decided to push a little. "Did you find everything you needed?" She nodded, pulling out a carton of eggs. "Yeah, the grocery store had everything. No issues." A direct lie. The grocery store had nothing to do with where she'd actually been. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Must have been busy. You were gone a while." She froze for half a second, just long enough for me to notice, before she turned to face me, her expression carefully neutral. "Yeah, there was a long line." I almost laughed. She was good, but I was better. That evening, we sat by the fire pit outside, sipping wine, the lake stretching out in front of us. Samantha leaned her head against my shoulder, sighing contentedly. "This trip was a good idea," she murmured. "Yeah," I agreed. "It really puts things in perspective." She smiled, closing her eyes, completely unaware that I had already set my next plan in motion. I had taken pictures at the cafe, but I needed more. I needed undeniable, concrete proof. A part of me was still unsure. Was she truly cheating, or was I just chasing shadows? The gift could have been innocent, though I highly doubted it. The next morning, Samantha said she wanted to take a hike alone, to clear her mind. Another lie. She left around 10 a.m., and I waited exactly 5 minutes before grabbing my keys and following her trail. But instead of going into the woods, I watched as she got into her car and drove down the main road. I followed at a safe distance. She didn't drive toward the hiking trails. Instead, she pulled into the same cafe from yesterday. I parked across the street, just out of sight, and watched as she walked inside. And there he was, the same man. She sat down across from him, and they started talking immediately. He reached for her hand across the table, and this time, she didn't pull away. That was it. That was the confirmation I needed. I snapped a few photos, my stomach twisting, but I forced myself to stay calm. The rage was there, simmering beneath the surface, but I couldn't afford to let it take over. Not yet. I needed to think, to plan. Samantha and her mystery man finished their conversation, and she left the cafe a few minutes later. I followed her back to the cabin, making sure she didn't notice me. When she walked inside, she greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. "The hike was amazing," she said. "I feel so refreshed." I swallowed my anger and smiled. Glad to hear it. She had no idea. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. She was still lying, still hiding the truth. But now, I had proof. Now, it was my turn to play the game. I woke up before she did. The morning light seeped through the curtains, casting a glow on her peaceful, sleeping face. It was almost ridiculous. How easily she slept, how at ease she seemed. Meanwhile, I had barely closed my eyes. My mind was racing, replaying every interaction, every lie she had told, every moment she thought I hadn't noticed. But I had noticed. I had seen everything. I got out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. The house was silent, except for the occasional crackle of the fire. I needed to think. Now that I had seen her with him, now that I had pictures, I had to decide what came next. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to be patient. If I wanted this to end on my terms, I had to be smarter than she was. By the time she woke up and came downstairs, I had already settled into my usual morning routine, acting as if nothing had changed. "Morning," she said, her voice groggy. "Morning," I replied, sipping my coffee. She leaned against the counter, stretching. "I was thinking we could go into town today. Walk around, maybe grab lunch?" I studied her carefully. She was testing me, trying to see if I suspected anything. If I had even the slightest doubt, The guilt would force its way into her voice. But she was calm. Too calm. Sounds like a plan, I said. We could use a day out. She smiled, pleased with herself. We spent the next few hours walking around town. Samantha pointed out little trinkets in shop windows, laughed at silly postcards, and pulled me into a quiet cafe for coffee. If I didn't know better, I would have believed it was a perfect day. She looked happy, relaxed, like a woman in love. But not with me. I played my part well. I laughed at her jokes, held her hand, kissed her cheek when she least expected it. She had no idea that every affectionate touch, every smile I gave her, was fueled by quiet rage. Then, just as I expected, she excused herself. I need to make a quick call, she said, holding up her phone. Work stuff. Of course, I said smoothly. She stepped outside the cafe, walking a few feet down the sidewalk, lowering her voice as she spoke. I could have followed her, could have pressed my ear against the glass, but I didn't need to. I already knew who she was calling. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the tracking app one had installed on her device 2 nights ago. A little digital dot marked her location, a safety net for when she inevitably decided to sneak off again. She returned a few minutes later, smiling as if nothing had happened. Sorry about that. Everything's good now. Great, I said, setting down my empty coffee cup. Ready to go? That evening, I made an excuse to leave the house for a bit. I'm going to pick up some firewood, I told her. We're running low. Want me to come? She asked. I shook my head. Nah, it's just a quick trip. She smiled, kissed me, and returned to her book on the couch. As if she wasn't already making plans behind my back, I got into my car and drove a few miles down the road before pulling into a dark parking lot. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. I had been playing it safe, but I needed to make my next move. I picked up my phone, scrolling through the photos I had taken at the cafe. The way she smiled at him, the way he reached for her hand, the way she had lied so effortlessly afterward. I dialed a number. It rang twice before he answered. Hello? I didn't speak right away. I wanted to hear his voice, wanted to listen to the sound of the man who thought he could sneak around with my wife and get away with it. Who is this? He asked again, irritation creeping into his tone. I took a slow breath. You don't know me, but I know you. And I know exactly what you've been doing. Silence. I smiled to myself. Meet me at the gas station by the lake. In 30 minutes. No excuses. I hung up before he could respond. I didn't need to hear whatever excuse he had prepared. I already knew the truth. Now, it was time to decide what to do with it. I parked at the gas station near the lake, the cold air settling in around me as I watched the clock on the dashboard. 10 minutes past our agreed meeting time. I half expected him to back out, to ignore the call and pretend nothing had happened. But I knew his type. Arrogant. Careless. The kind of man who thought he was untouchable. Headlights cut through the darkness, and a sleek black truck pulled into the lot. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I watched him step out, glancing around cautiously. He was tall, fit, dressed like someone who spent a lot of time in the gym, not for health, but for vanity. I stepped out of my car and leaned against the hood, making sure he saw me first. His eyes narrowed, and for a second, I saw the flicker of recognition. He knew who I was. Good. You called me, he said, keeping his voice casual, like this was just another conversation. Yeah, I said, crossing my arms. Figured it was about time we talked. He gave me a half smile, the kind men like him always had when they thought they were in control. Look, man, I don't know what you think. Cut the act, I interrupted, my voice sharp. I know everything. I know where, I know when, and I know how long it's been going on. That shut him up. He shifted slightly, his weight moving from one foot to the other, debating whether to lie or own up to it. She told me things were complicated. He finally said, his voice slower now, more careful, that you two weren't in a good place. I let out a humorless laugh. Yeah? That what she told you? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, man, I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't go looking for it. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Neither did I. But here we are. His jaw clenched. So what now? You want to fight me? Yell at me? What's the point? I smiled, shaking my head. No. No fighting. No yelling. You're not worth the effort. Something in my tone unsettled him. His confidence wavered, just for a second. Then why call me out here? To tell you this, I said, my voice calm. You're nothing. You think you mean something to her? You don't. You're just a distraction. She'll move on to the next guy when she gets bored. And when she does, I want you to remember this conversation. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Whatever, man. I took a step back. Enjoy your time with her while it lasts. Because soon, she's going to lose everything. And when she does, you'll just be another mistake she won't admit to making. I turned and walked back to my car, leaving him standing there, confused and frustrated. I didn't need to punch him. I didn't need to scream. The doubt I had just planted in his mind would do more damage than my fists ever could. I drove home, the tension in my chest finally starting to settle. My plan was almost complete. Samantha was sitting on the couch when I walked in, her legs curled up under her as she scrolled through her phone. She looked up and smiled. Hey, you were gone a while. Everything okay? Yeah, I said, forcing an easy smile. Just needed some air. She nodded, looking back at her phone. She wasn't worried. She wasn't suspicious. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I put the final piece of my plan into place. While Samantha was out running errands, I met with the realtor. I want it listed immediately, I said, signing the last page of the contract. The agent looked at me, surprised. Are you sure? Selling a house this quickly isn't always easy. I leaned back in the chair, a slow grin forming. Oh, I have a feeling it'll sell faster than you think. By the time Samantha returned home, the for sale sign was already planted in the front yard. She stopped dead in her tracks, her keys slipping from her hand onto the pavement. Her eyes darted to the sign, then to me, standing on the porch. I folded my arms, watching the color drain from her face. Welcome home, sweetheart. Her voice was barely a whisper. What is this? I smiled. Just a little change of plans. Hope you don't mind. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for words. You're selling the house? Not just selling, I said. It's already sold. She stared at me in horror. You're lying. I pulled the contract from my jacket and held it up. Finalized this morning. The buyers move in next week. I'll be out before then. I suggest you do the same. She took a step forward, panic creeping into her voice. Ethan, please. We can talk about this. I shook my head. Oh, now you want to talk? Funny, you didn't seem too interested in talking when you were sneaking around behind my back. Tears welled in her eyes. It's not what you think. I cut her off. Don't insult me, Samantha. I know everything. I know about the texts, the late nights, the meetings that weren't really meetings. And I know about him. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She knew there was no more hiding. I stepped past her, heading toward my car. You have until Friday. After that, this place won't be ours anymore. She reached for my arm, desperation in her grip. Ethan, please. Let's fix this. I pulled away, giving her one last, cold look. You already broke it. And with that, I drove off, leaving her standing there, shattered, in front of the home she would never live in again. The house was nearly empty now, stripped of everything that made it a home. Boxes stacked neatly by the front door, the walls bare, the echoes of our past life bouncing off the hollow rooms. I had spent the last few days dismantling everything we had built, piece by piece, until nothing was left but memories I no longer wanted. Samantha sat on the staircase, watching me with tired, red-rimmed eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Good. You don't have to do this, she said, her voice small, as if she already knew how little weight her words carried. I grabbed the last of my things from the counter and zipped up my bag. You're right. I don't. But I am. She stood up quickly, moving toward me. Ethan, please. I know I made mistakes, but this is our home. I glanced around at the empty walls. No, Samantha, this was our home. But you killed that the second you decided to bring someone else into it. She swallowed hard, her hands wringing together. It didn't mean anything. I was confused. I was stressed. The house, the renovations. It was overwhelming, and I wasn't thinking straight. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. So you thought sleeping with the contractor would make things easier? Was that part of the renovation plan? Tear down the foundation of our marriage along with the walls? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. She had spent months lying, sneaking, pretending, and now, she wanted to cry? Now, when it was all crashing down around her. Too late. She shook her head. I was going to end it. I swear. I was just scared. I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't know how to tell me? I repeated, my voice sharp. You didn't know how to tell me, but you knew how to sneak around behind my back. You knew how to look me in the eye every day and pretend everything was fine. You knew how to lie, Samantha, and you were good at it. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped, looking down. She knew she had no defense. I pulled the house keys from my pocket and set them on the counter. It's done. The papers are signed. The house is no longer ours. She stiffened. Where are you going? I smirked. Anywhere but here. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, I saw real panic in her eyes. Ethan, don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through it. Please. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. There's nothing to fix. You didn't just cheat on me, Samantha. You made me believe in something that was never real. You made me feel like a fool, and I don't forgive that. She grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. I love you. I stared at her, long enough for the weight of those words to settle. Then I pulled my arm away. No, you don't. You love what I gave you. You love the security, the stability, the idea of us. But you don't love me. If you did, this never would have happened. She let out a quiet sob, covering her mouth with her hand. I should have felt something, anger, sadness, regret, but all I felt was relief. I picked up my bag and walked to the door. Take care of yourself, Samantha. She rushed after me. Ethan, please, don't go. I turned back one last time. I already did. And then I walked out, leaving her behind in a house that was no longer hers, in a life that was no longer mine. I had expected silence when I left Samantha behind, but I underestimated her desperation. For the past week, my phone had been flooded with calls, messages, and voicemails, each one more frantic than the last. She tried every angle: anger, apologies, guilt, even nostalgia. None of it worked. At first, I ignored them. Then, out of curiosity, I played a few voicemails. Ethan, please, just talk to me. We can fix this. We built a life together, and you're throwing it away like it meant nothing. The next day, you sold our house? Our dream home? Do you even care what you've done to me? Where am I supposed to go? You had no right. The next day, I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. I don't even know why I did it. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I was selfish, but I swear, I never stopped loving you. By the end of the week, I deleted them all without listening. She wasn't sorry. She was just afraid of the consequences. I was done. The house was gone, and I had officially moved into my new place, a modern loft downtown, overlooking the city. It wasn't a house with a yard, with walls I had built by hand, but it was mine. No ghosts, no lies, no betrayals. Just me. I sat on the balcony, sipping coffee, watching the world move below. I should have felt empty. I should have felt the loss of everything I had walked away from, but all I felt was weightless. Then, another text popped up. Samantha, I need to see you. Just once. Please. I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Part of me wanted to block her number and be done with it. But another part of me, maybe the part that wanted closure, told me to face her one last time. So I did. I met her at a small cafe, a neutral place, away from any memories we shared. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, stirring a cup of tea with shaking hands. She looked thinner, exhausted, her hair a little messy like she hadn't slept. When she saw me, her face lit up with hope. Ethan, she breathed, as if just saying my name would make things different. I sat across from her, silent, waiting. She reached for my hand. Thank you for coming. I pulled away. Say what you need to say. She swallowed, nodding. I miss you. I miss us. I know I screwed up, but I can't just let you go like this. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Samantha, I already let you go. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. She leaned forward. I still love you. I met her gaze, unflinching. No, you don't. You love the idea of me. You love the life we built. But if you really loved me, you never would have risked losing me. A tear slipped down her cheek. I was stupid. I made a mistake. But people come back from this. Couples heal. I can prove to you that I'm worth fighting for. I exhaled sharply, pushing back my chair. That's just it, Samantha. I spent years fighting for us. You didn't. And now, I don't have it in me to fight anymore. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Her voice broke. So that's it? You're just walking away? I nodded. I already did. She collapsed into quiet sobs as I turned and walked out. When I stepped into the fresh air, it hit me. This was the last time I would ever see her. The last time she would have any hold on me. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. I pulled out my phone, blocked her number, and walked away, toward a future that was finally mine alone. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.